Things are gonna get crazy!
Most everyone's mad here.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a different kind of episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. How are you all doing, everybody? I hope you all had a nice weekend or just a nice week in general. But for me, well, I might as well go and start things off by explaining why this episode is going to be different. Now, I know, by the way, technically, yes, this is not the first time that I would do something like this, but it is still a very rare occasion when this does happen. So allow me to go and talk about why this is happening right now with this episode. The reason is actually because, well, maybe you already noticed this if you are watching, considering that, well, the chat wall looks pretty empty. Well, that is because this episode was not live streamed. In fact, this episode was only recorded. And the reason why I didn't do a live stream for this episode is mainly because of scheduling conflicts. Now, I'll do the best I can in order to make a long story short of this, but as you guys probably know, I may have mentioned this in a previous episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, but just before Christmas, I did have a car accident. But recently, however, I did get a call from my insurance, and they told me that unfortunately, my car was deemed scrapped, which pretty much means that I got to go find a new car. The big catch with all that, however, is that the best time for me to go and actually find a new car and get the best help that I can during that time is actually right at the same time as when I regularly do the live streams of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. So in that case, I had to go and make a big sacrifice where I decided, okay, you know what? I'm just not going to go and do a live stream, but I will still have an episode of the podcast for this week. And I know some people might ask, well, why couldn't I just go and reschedule the live stream so that it could still be a more regular episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast? Well, that's another problem right there, because this week also happened to be a very busy time for me. Like, my schedule is just packed. So I don't really have time to just move the live stream to somewhere else. And instead, this is the best that I could pretty much do for now. And that's just to go and skip the live stream entirely, but at least have a recording of it so that there can still be an episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. Which, again, is why, as you can see if you are watching this, that there is no chat wall, or that the chat wall is pretty much empty. So I'll be skipping the part where I would ask the audience, read their comments, and, you know, just have a little bit of a chat about the stories that we would go and talk about. However, even though we are going to be missing a few parts here, I will still do the best I can in order to go and make a fun episode. And I knew that I couldn't just go and skip this week altogether, because in the past few days, we have had a crazy abundance of major news, especially what's been happening in Hollywood and even with what's been going on in animation. So much so that I had to go and make some sacrifices in order to really focus on like the major animation news that I find that are really worth talking about, that would make very interesting discussions, and not to mention, of course, the ones that people really want to hear my thoughts about, which you will understand a little bit later. But there are, like, I guess you could say, a few honorable mentions worth talking about. Like, for example, David Ellison and Skydance, or Paramount in this case, they're not giving up on trying to get Warner Brothers. They're still trying to go and make their hostile bid and make sure that Warner Brothers doesn't get into the hands of Netflix. So that's still going on. And then there is also the report that Kathleen Kennedy is stepping down as president of Lucasfilms, and her position is going to be replaced by two people. I forgot the other person's name. It's like Linwin something, but she's going to be handling the business side of it, while the creative side and the co-president is going to be Dave Filoni. So kind of crazy that now an animation guy is going to be taking over, or partly taking over, Lucasfilm and taking over like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and stuff like that. And then there is also the news about Zootopia 2 very recently has surpassed Inside Out 2 to now become the highest grossing American animated feature of all time. However, it's still got a long way to go if it wants to be the highest grossing animated feature ever, because Noja 2 is still very comfortable in that position and is still a few $100 million, or 100 million? No, not 100 million. Or would it be 100 million actually? No, I was right actually. It is like a few $100 million away from Zootopia 2. So, or no, like ahead of Zootopia 2, that I mean. But yeah, you get what I mean though, is that Zootopia 2 did manage to surpass Inside Out 2 at the box office. But again, those are just the honorable mentions. I still have plenty of fun stories to go and discuss about that I have in store. Yes, this is all going to be a full-on solo act, but still, I will do my best to make the most out of it over here, and this will still come out as a fun-filled episode. So, considering that, well, unfortunately, I don't have my chat wall with me to ask if anybody is ready, but hopefully you listening and watching are ready, because now it is time that we are going to go and get things started. And with the first story that I have for you today, we're going to begin with something that is pretty enjoyable, but something that we kind of already knew because there was a bit of a hint that this was actually happening. But in this case, however, this is the confirmation that we have been waiting for, and now it feels like it's going to be a little bit more official. So without further ado, let's go and begin by discussing about the announcement of the Speedy Gonzales movie. Yes, Warner Brothers Pictures Animation has officially revealed that they have now greenlit an animated feature starring the famous Looney Tunes character Speedy Gonzales. Now, it is worth mentioning right now that there's not much info that we really know about it. We don't know who's going to be playing Speedy Gonzales. We don't even know who's going to be the writer. We don't even know what the plot is going to be about. However, we did get a confirmation on who's going to be the director of this project, which is none other than animation superstar Jorge Gutiérrez. Yes, the man who has brought us many beloved projects such as El Tigre, The Book of Life, Maya and the Three. Now his latest and maybe greatest project is now going to be Speedy Gonzales. It is worth noting, however, that this is not the first time that Warner Brothers attempted to go and create a movie starring Speedy Gonzales. In fact, in my source here on The Hollywood Reporter, there is a little part in which it actually states about a previous attempt that they made about a decade ago, to which it says here, Warner Brothers had previously developed a big screen take on Speedy Gonzales more than a decade ago, with Eugenio Derbez, I hope I say his name right, if not, I do apologize, with Eugenio Derbez casting as the voice star reported in 2016. During a 2024 interview with United Press International, the actor said that his movie was unlikely to get made as the property was presumably seen as politically incorrect by studio's brass. He stated here, the only ones offended are Americans, but we love Speedy Gonzales, Derbez said at the time, referencing criticism over the years that the character presents a Mexican stereotype. He's smart, he outsmarts the cats, he's a hero, he gets cheese for his people, he's fast. And we don't really have much other info, as I said before, but we did get this little quote here coming from the president of Warner Brothers Pictures Animation, Bill Damashki, commenting about this new project of the Speedy Gonzales movie with Jorge Gutiérrez, in which he states, Jorge is a singular storyteller whose voice, artistry, and cultural perspective make every project he touches feel both timeless and completely new. We couldn't be more excited to have him reimagining Speedy Gonzales, one of our most beloved Looney Tunes characters, for today's global audiences. And as I said before, this was a project that was hinted a little bit in the past. Well, maybe not like way back in the past, but it was like about a few weeks ago that Jorge Gutiérrez himself actually gave out a clue that he was working on this project. Although, may I just say, it's a little bit of an obvious clue, because if you do go down here, this was the Instagram post that he made in which he says, guess what movie I might be developing at Warner Brothers Pictures Animation? And as you can see here, this is a picture of Jorge Gutiérrez wearing a Speedy Gonzales shirt, holding a Speedy Gonzales figure, as well as, wearing a little bit of gear similar to Speedy with a red scarf and a mini sombrero, or I believe is a mini sombrero, but a similar hat to Speedy regardless. But yeah, this is pretty much the big thing that has been announced. It's the fact that Jorge Gutiérrez is officially going to be directing a Speedy Gonzales movie. And I am definitely familiar with the whole backstory and the cultural relevance of Speedy Gonzales, that there was a time, especially I remember in the last decade, when that subject was still pretty hot, in which a lot of people were discussing about the controversial aspect of Speedy Gonzales and if he would be deemed either offensive or if he's actually a good representation of Mexico. Because as you may know, Warner Brothers is no stranger for making racial depictions that are nowadays, the best way to put it is outdated, especially when they have the censored 11, the 11 cartoons from Warner Brothers that heavily depict black stereotypes that nowadays they're not really worth presenting to the public, because some of them, I will say, they could be absolutely yikes. And some people feel like maybe the same can also be applied to Speedy Gonzales. But that's not necessarily the case, considering that actual Mexicans, they love the crap out of Speedy Gonzales. Maybe some people could argue that there might be some traits of him that sound a bit like a stereotype, but all in all, Speedy is represented as a straight up hero. He is seen as the good guy of all of his cartoons, especially when he would go and try to help his community get all the cheese and get past through Sylvester the Cat. Often, funny enough, when looking back, there is, funny enough, you could say that those cartoons, instead of being offensive, that they are a bit ahead of their time, considering that you could interpret that there's a bit of a social commentary discussing about the US-Mexico border and how Mexico can always find a way to go and outsmart the US in order to go and get a better life for their respective communities. So there is that, there is that aspect that you could go and look at it that way, and could also go and explain why there is massive love for Speedy Gonzales in Mexico. So yeah, I know these discussions could keep bringing up again and again and again, and there are some Americans out there that might feel like, I don't know, there's something not politically correct about Speedy Gonzales. But this is one of those cases where no, the Speedy, in this case, he's actually a good representation of Mexico, and he is considered a massive icon for who he is. And honestly, if the Mexicans love him, then I'm not going to go and take that away from him. I think that's more of a very positive trait, and more like of a reason why Speedy's legacy is extremely strong even nowadays. But going back into this project in particular, I gotta say, the more I think about it, the more I feel like this is actually a really cool idea. The more that, like even though we don't have that much information about it, I mean, let's be honest, the most that we know is just the fact that Jorge Gutiérrez is going to be directing it, and that's it. But still, though, that I feel like is kind of enough to have me be optimistically curious at the very least about this project. Because the thing with Jorge Gutiérrez is that he, like, of course he is known as a filmmaker and an animator, but one of the main things to really emphasize about who Jorge Gutiérrez is, at least in the animation field, is that he really is an artist. Like, he is very much recognized for his distinct style, not only telling stories that greatly highlight Mexican culture, Mexican history, Mexican myths and legends, and so much more, but also his artistic approach when creating his art, rather it be in cartoons or in actual art pieces, like in his paintings and stuff like that. You can actually tell that he has this very distinct and unique style, almost like street art in a way, but brought to life with his craftsmanship. And you could see it very distinctively in his projects, like, as I said, with El Tigre, with the Book of Life, with Maya and the Three, and even some other projects that he has done recently, including, at one point, he actually did do a Simpsons couch gag that is completely dedicated to his art style, even getting cameos from characters from the Book of Life, as well as something that just a few weeks ago he actually did put out, like just before 2025 ended. He released this pilot for this cartoon that he has, which I believe it's called El Guapo and the Narco Vampires. I may have gotten that name wrong, but you can actually go and check it out on YouTube. And even though most of it is just an animatic, it really is a badass pilot that he created, especially when the whole concept of it is his interpretation of the universal monsters, where you got this luchador guy going out there fighting against like vampires, werewolves, mummies, think of all the different universal monsters out there, and Jorge Gutiérrez put in his own spin on them and created something that very much is badass. And again, if you guys haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you go and check it out. It's free to check out on YouTube, even though it's just a work print. It's not fully complete. The majority of it is just an animatic. And it definitely is worth seeing. But the point that I want to go and make here is that when I do look at this project in particular and hearing that Jorge Gutiérrez is going to be making a Speedy Gonzales movie, I really want to see if he really is going to emphasize his style onto Speedy Gonzales and onto the Looney Tunes world. Like, I'll just say now, I do completely understand why they would want someone like Jorge Gutiérrez to go and direct a Speedy Gonzales movie, because if you want a feature that really celebrates and highlights Mexican culture, then of course Jorge Gutiérrez is absolutely your man. But what I want to know is Jorge gonna go and actually implement his artistic style onto the Looney Tunes world? Like, are we going to see the Looney Tunes characters like Speedy Gonzales and maybe a few more that they could go and include? Like, if they're going to include like Sylvester the Cat, or maybe we'll see some cameos like from Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck or something like that. But still, like, having his style onto the Looney Tunes world, that would honestly be absolutely epic. Rather it be if they want to do something that is like hand-drawn, or maybe like most likely they would go and do a computer animated feature where the style is going to be more reminiscent to what we have seen with Maya and the Three and the Book of Life. honestly, I would absolutely be down to go and check it out, and would be such a great, unique spin onto the look of Speedy Gonzales and just the Looney Tunes world in general. So overall, even though there's not much else to go and describe about it, because again, we don't have much info other than knowing who the director is and who the main subject is going to be about, honestly, I'm going to keep my eye on this, and I feel a little bit hyped about it. I just say a little bit because I want to know more info to like really help validate the hype, but honestly, it feels like it's really going on the right direction, and I feel like Warner Brothers picked a really good director for this project, or I would even dare say the right director for this project. And I can't wait to see how it goes, and hopefully this project will actually flourish and it will actually get released. Even though right now it's like still very early in production, if it does get made, then there is a very good chance that we're just going to end up seeing it somewhere at the end of this 2020 decade. But still, hopefully it will get made, and I wish Jorge Gutiérrez and the team at Warner Brothers Pictures Animation the best of luck to have this be created, and that they do justice to Speedy Gonzales. All right, so with that said, yes, even though I don't have the chat wall to go and talk about this, we might as well go on to our first break. And when we do come back, well, sadly, this episode is going to get a little bit more sad and a little bit more somber, considering that we will be discussing about some significant deaths that has happened in the past few days. And the one that I will be discussing after this break, well, it's going to be very fascinating to look into this person's life, considering that, well, this is about a disgraced individual. So stay tuned for that. Welcome back. Now, when it comes to the next couple of stories that we have here, we will be discussing about some unfortunate celebrity passings, or at least people who are recognized in their respective fields that are unfortunately no longer with us. Now, the first one that I will be discussing about, this is actually a disgraced figure, someone who actually had a very good life, but unfortunately committed some self-sabotage to the point that, well, not too long before his passing, he pretty much straight up canceled himself and really went down a very bad political rabbit hole to the point that, well, sadly, very few people are actually mourning his death. And I honestly understand why. And you'll understand why when I will go and discuss about the passing of Scott Adams. Yes, it was recently reported that the creator of the Dilbert comics, Scott Adams, has passed away at the age of 68 due to, I believe it was some kind of cancer. I think skin cancer or colon cancer. I believe this article in the Hollywood Reporter would go and actually describe it more. In fact, I will go and read this part. I think they will go and describe... Oh, prostate cancer. Okay, so yes, unfortunately, he passed away of prostate cancer. So let me just go and read you the announcement of when he passed away, to which it's stated here: his death was tearfully revealed by his first ex-wife, Shelley Miles, at the start of Real Coffee with Scott Adams. In May, he said on the podcast that he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, which had spread to his bones. I expect to be checking out from this domain this summer, he said. In a statement he wrote that was read by Miles over 6 minutes, he said, "Things did not go well for me. My body fell before my brain." And to give you a quick summary about Scott Adams, this was a guy who used to be the average office worker, where he would just go and work on his regular 9-to-5 job, specifically as an engineer at Pacific Bell. Which from there, his average life pretty much gave him the inspiration to go and create a comic about office life with Dilbert, which that went on to become a massive success and even an iconic comic strip in itself. Which from there, the name of Dilbert almost became as prominent as something like Blondie or Garfield or Hagar the Horrible and a few of those comic strips. Like, Dilbert pretty much became recognizable over the years, even down to the point where there was actually a Dilbert series that happened in the late 90s and the early 2000s, which I will go and explain a little bit later. But over the years, however, Scott Adams became more recognized for something else, however. In his later years, he actually grew more and more, or maybe not necessarily grew, but became more openly conservative and leaning a lot more into having many political discussions. And that right there was what really ruined his life altogether, because the more he would discuss about his conservative ideologies, the more that he would lean further and further to the right with his own politics. And that, more often than not, has actually got him into a lot of trouble. And this is actually why nowadays he's more recognized for the crazy things that he would go and say on social media, rather than just being the creator of the Dilbert comics. In fact, the more that he openly became as a conservative figure, the more that the Dilbert comics have been hated by the general public. And let's just go and have a few examples, like a few highlights of some of the crazy things that he has said and why is it that his own conservatism has ultimately ruined his life. Like, one prominent example is right over here, in which Politico says is one of the worst political predictions that have been made on social media, in which this was a comment that Scott Adams actually made about the 2020 US elections of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, in which he actually says, reading from my source on Politico, "If Biden is elected, there's a good chance you will be dead within the year. Republicans will be hunted. Police will stand down." So, as you can tell, this was obviously a little bit crazy. Of course, that did not happen during Joe Biden's time, or at least it didn't happen, or not that it didn't happen under Joe Biden. It's not because of Joe Biden that something like this would go and occur. Although I will say, however, that there is something a little bit eerily accurate about it. It's just, if you switch the roles, then he might actually be right. Like, if you replace what he said about Republicans and just switched it to Democrats, and if you switch Biden to Trump, that's unfortunately what's been happening right now, actually. That's what we are seeing in our reality. So if Scott Adams just changed those roles, then honestly, maybe he would be onto something. Case in point, look at what happened to Renee Good. So, yeah, but considering that Scott Adams was just targeting Democrats in this case, yeah, he could not be more wrong in this one. And by the way, also, I know I mentioned this before, but again, may Renee Good rest in peace, and I wish the best of luck to the people of Minnesota now that they are still being attacked by the domestic terrorists that we know as ICE agents. But anyways, back to what I was talking about. That's just one objectively horrible take that Scott Adams put out. But then there's also another straight up lie that Scott Adams would say, and that's regarding COVID, in which he actually stated at the start of 2023, so just about exactly 3 years ago, he said people not vaccinated against COVID-19 came out the best. Are you sure about that? Because I can go and ask many people who were not vaccinated how they are right now, and I can guarantee you the grand majority of them have some serious regrets. In fact, I could pretty much say that the grand majority of people who were not vaccinated, they wouldn't be able to go and respond back because they are dead. And not to mention, about the long-term symptoms that COVID would go and carry, some of which people are still having to this day. And I mean, I can pretty much speak for myself why I know that this is just a straight up lie, considering that I have been vaccinated several times during the pandemic, and I can pretty much say that I only got COVID once, and right now, as I'm recording this, I am completely fine. I got no problems whatsoever. So, safe to say that someone like me who has been vaccinated has turned out much better than people who are not vaccinated against COVID-19. But that is not all, however. There is also another one that Scott Adams made, and this was actually back several years ago, back in the mid-2000s though, but this was actually considered to be one of his most problematic comments, where there was a point where Scott Adams actually went into a Holocaust denial mode. I am not joking here. There was at one point where, okay, maybe it isn't straight up Holocaust denial, but he was promoting Holocaust skepticism, where I believe it was in a 2006 blog in which he actually questioned the amount of Jews that were actually killed during World War II, in which I'm going in my source here. This is an archive page, but this is from the website Fast Forward, or just Forward, and it actually states right over here, where is it? Yes, okay. In which it says here, Scott Adams, creator of the Dilbert comics, wrote in a now deleted blog post from 2006 that he wanted to know how the Holocaust death total of 6 million was determined. He stated, "Is it the sort of number that is so well documented with actual names and perhaps a Nazi paper trail that no historian could doubt its accuracy, given or take 10,000? Or is it like every other large round number that someone pulled out of his ass and it became true by repetition?" Again, it may not necessarily be straight up Holocaust denial, but still, the fact that it is Holocaust skepticism, that is still a massive red flag and a serious yikes. Like, it's one of those that kind of makes you wonder, how the fridge was this guy not canceled before? Like, how is it that people did not get rid of him in the 2000s when he would say something that is just absolutely insane? Like, seriously, something that is just so demented to even think about, or to even like just have, to even have that brain cell pop up just to make you say that. Like, that is not right whatsoever. And by the way, yes, of course it is godforsaken documented. Of course, like, there's a bunch of evidence and a bunch of paper trail to even prove that, yes, those millions of Jewish people were indeed killed during World War II because of Nazi ideologies that Hitler kept promoting at the time. But the most infamous comment that Scott Adams did, the one that ultimately got him canceled, was actually from a few years ago, when he stated a comment about black people that just went too far. And this was actually back again in 2003, when he went on a YouTube live stream and he made this unhinged rant about black people. So let me just go and read you from my source here on NPR, in which it actually states here, and by the way, this is the one that was so bad that, yes, it really got him canceled, and this is what led to newspapers to no longer distribute Dilbert. So it says here, the distributor of Scott Adams' Dilbert comic strips, Andrews McMeel Universal, announced Sunday that it was severing ties with the cartoonist. This came after Adams urged white people to get the hell away from black people during a racist rant on his online video program last week, during which he labeled black people as a hate group. The Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and other newspapers across the country had already announced that they would no longer carry the syndicated comic strip. And from there, like, his career was pretty much deemed done. I mean, it didn't stop him from making his own Dilbert comics online, and it didn't stop him from making these kinds of crazy rants online as well, still being this like wackadoodle white nationalist nut job. But still, however, this really was the one that has essentially ruined his legacy, ruined his career, and straight up ruined his life. Now, one thing that I will go and state is that no, this does not make him straight up mentally ill. And this was a mistake that I personally have made, if I have to go and admit it. Honestly, it's something that I do have to learn, that no, conservatism is not a mental illness, because unlike your gender or your sexual orientation or your race, it's not something, the thing is with conservatism is that it is a choice. Like, you choose to be a conservative, you choose to have those kinds of ideologies, which makes conservatism worse than a mental illness. So this is something that even I myself have to admit that I have to learn to be better and not to go and make that kind of association, because I do understand how it is ethically wrong to go and do so. But with that said, though, it's hard not to look at what Scott Adams would go and say. It feels difficult to see what he would go and say about Black people, about Democrats, about COVID, and about the Holocaust, and not think that something is wrong. Because let's be real, at the very least, the things that he would go and say, they do not sound like it's coming from a healthy human being that knows what they're talking about. Like, those are the kinds of things that you would feel like something, you kind of let out your inner Hank Hill and you just look at the dude going, that boy is not right. Because honestly, let's be real, because like, not only is everything that he would say out of his conservative voice is factually wrong, but it just sounds absolutely unhinged from there. So yes, even though conservatism is not a mental illness, the thing is, Scott Adams is not a good case to go and present that. Like, if you want proof that conservatism is not a mental illness, don't look at Scott Adams, because the comments that he would go and make, they don't sound healthy. They don't sound like they come from a normal human being with a normal functioning brain, or at least the kind of functioning brain that doesn't make you an absolute psychopath. But with all that said, however, this really does highlight that it shows how his conservative politics really was the cause of why his life has been ruined, why nowadays he is considered to be a straight up disgraced figure whom at worst is a straight up white nationalist, where he would unironically believe in those like Holocaust denial theories, that he would believe in like those fairy tales of eugenics and apartheid and stuff like that. And that the more that he would lean more and more towards the right, the more that he would just be presented himself as like the male J.K. Rowling, as just straight up being less known as the creator of Dilbert and just known as a wealthy white man just decided to go completely insane with his ideologies. And that's why nowadays you barely see anyone actually mourning his passing. You barely see anybody who is upset that he has passed away. It really does ring true to the old saying that this is something in which nowadays we are starting to see more and more. In fact, like whenever you see this kind of douchebaggy person that is no longer with us, you often see the meme where people would go and bring up that if someone would go and argue that you should be respectful to someone who has passed away, they would go and respond by saying that you should be a nice person before you pass away if you want to have that kind of respect. And unfortunately, with Scott Adams, he lost that respect entirely with his heavily bigoted rants. And it really is tragic to see, mainly because, and this might end up sounding like a hot take, but I just want to go and say that when you focus on Dilbert itself, I get why it became popular. Like, I also do understand why is it that many people don't like Dilbert nowadays, and especially like in the later years of his comics, especially when Scott Adams became more and more prominently conservative, that they became they became completely unfunny and they just don't make any sense whatsoever. But the thing is that during the past, like especially in the 90s and in the early 2000s, I completely get why Dilbert became so popular and why he was considered to be iconic amongst comic strips. In fact, I remember there was a period where there would be office spaces in which people would go, like, not that I've actually worked in an office space, but, sometimes like for situations related to finances or any other kind of different business, sometimes like you would have to get into an office to go and discuss with the person for getting the help that you need. But like when you go into those offices during that time, there's bound to be at least one person who would go and decorate their decorate their little office space where they would have at least one comic strip of Dilbert that they would go and heavily relate to. Because there was a time that Dilbert was considered to be the voice of the average person, the voice of the office worker, the blue collar middle class. And that often Dilbert would go and present those like little problems in a comical way. In a way, Dilbert was the Office before the Office was a thing. And honestly, my personal biggest memory related to Dilbert was actually the series that again came out in the late 1990s or early 2000s or somewhere between that time. And honestly, I actually really enjoyed that cartoon. I thought it was actually great. Like I know, and again, I understand if there are people who are really turned off by it, mainly because of like who Scott Adams was in his later years and stuff like that. But well, I remember a few years back, I actually did go and review the cartoon. And honestly, I had a great time with it, as I did back when it was on TV, when, funny enough, I was a kid watching it. Like, it's a pretty solid cartoon that can actually have a whole bunch of funny moments. And it's actually very clever with a bunch of surprisingly progressive social commentary that they would go and discuss. If you guys haven't seen the cartoon, honestly, I highly recommend that you go check it out. There was honestly something great that you could be found. And even though I will say, yes, this is the kind of show that would often have like celebrity guest stars, and there are a few that they would be in the yikes category, like they would have like Jerry Seinfeld and stuff like that. But still, though, is like, personally, I actually did enjoy the cartoon. I think it is very solid. But still, though, looking back into the life of Scott Adams, it really is very tragic to see him end this way. And not necessarily just the fact that he passed away young due to a prostate cancer, but it's also the fact that his life just ended up being spoiled by his own politics. Like, this was a guy who won at life, pretty much, that he had a very successful comic going on, and then suddenly, like, even though he has gathered great fame and wealth, he ended up ruining it with his own ideologies, down to the point where it ended up getting him straight up canceled, where the legacy of his comics have been completely ruined by it. And when he passed away, again, you barely see anyone go and unironically mourn his passing. Or when people would go and discuss about who he is, they have to acknowledge that he was a horrible person. I mean, if anything, this feels like another prominent example of why is it that when we see people discussing about significant ones who have passed away, there are many more, or I would say the grand majority would be mourning more of the loss of someone like Renee Good or George Floyd than someone like Scott Adams or Charlie Kirk. So that's the thing. I just feel like when it comes to Scott Adams, he really is someone that, you know, you don't want to grow up to go and become. You don't want to go and screw up your life by unironically believing in these kinds of delusional, conservative, or apartheid-like ideologies. You know, like, I feel like his life is more of a tragedy than his actual death. And that's, you know, and that's the thing, is it's just the fact that, you know, this guy he ended up ruining his life by the end of it when he had it very well for himself. He established something great and decided to just screw it all over because the delusional nonsense that he believed through his right-wing ideologies just really messed it up. And honestly, the only thing that I could really wish for him is that wherever he is in the afterlife, he can let go of those conservative ideologies. He doesn't have to go and believe in the fairy tales of the great replacement theory or eugenics and all that kind of nonsense, that he can let that all go and that he could just be happy. Because that, you know, and that's honestly the saddest thing, is that honestly, I never felt that when he was a conservative that he was ever happy. I would even go as far and say, and as heartbreaking as this does sound, I kind of feel like with Scott Adams, he doesn't sound like someone who was ready to die. He doesn't sound like someone who actually wanted to go and be ready to go into the afterlife. He sounded like someone who wanted to go and like continue on, but this cancer turned out to be a major hindrance. In fact, like, you could tell that he wasn't ready to go, because one of the final tweets that he has ever done, or one of the final posts on social media that he has made, was actually pleading to Donald Trump to go and save him, to give him whatever funds he can in order to help treat his cancer. Like, he wasn't asking for his doctors to get him better. He wasn't asking for Jesus. He was asking for Donald Trump to go and help. And as you can see, Donald Trump did absolutely nothing about it. So that's why I'm wishing him all the best in the afterlife, that he no longer becomes a conservative, that he no longer has to maintain those weird right-wing ideologies, and that he can have a happier life in a more liberal afterlife wherever he may be. So yeah, honestly, I get that he's not well liked by the grand majority of the public. I understand if you're not mourning for his loss, but the only thing that I could go and say for Scott Adams is that wherever he is, I hope that he can let go of that conservatism that has straight up ruined his life. All right, so we're going to go on to our next break. And when we do come back, there is one more passing that I will go and talk about. But in this case here, this is someone whom, safe to say, is a lot more beloved than Scott Adams. And it really is the fact that he passed away that really is the tragedy in all this. So we will be right back, and I will go and discuss about the second death that recently happened. Welcome back. Now, when it comes to our next story, or I guess you could say our next obituary here, we are going to go and discuss about a prominent figure in the animation industry that we have unfortunately lost. But unlike Scott Adams, this was actually someone who was very beloved. And this is someone that when you see people talking about him across social media, they had nothing but very good things to go and say about the guy. Not only has he left a great impact onto those who have collaborated with him, but also left a great impact with the work that he has done in the industry, especially at Disney. So with that said, let's go and discuss about the passing of Roger Allers. Yes, Roger Allers, the prominent Disney story artist and director, has unfortunately passed away at the age of 76. This was sadly first reported by animator and animation historian Dave Bozert, in which he made a post here on Facebook, which I will go and read you here, to which it is stated, "I am deeply saddened by the news that our friend Roger Allers has passed on to his next journey. We were just trading emails this past week while he was traveling in Egypt, which makes this loss feel all the more unreal. Roger was an extraordinarily gifted artist and filmmaker, a true pillar of the Disney animation renaissance. He began at Disney doing pre-production concepts for Tron. He then became a story artist on Oliver and Company and The Little Mermaid and other films, eventually becoming head of story on Beauty and the Beast. I had the privilege of being part of the crew with Roger on many films in the late 80s and throughout the 90s, and he was, without question, one of the kindest people you could hope to know and work alongside. He went on to co-direct The Lion King, a phenomenal success, yet it never went to his head. Roger treated everyone with genuine kindness and respect, regardless of title or position. I worked very closely with him on The Little Match Girl, and it was nothing short of a joy. He carried a sense of wonder, generosity, and enthusiasm that lifted everyone around him. Roger had a joyful, luminous spirit, and the world is dimmer without him. Rest in peace, my friend, until we meet again on the other side." I'm pictured with Roger in 2016 at an Academy event. I always admired his colorful sports jackets. At the same time, we also received a comment from the CEO of the Walt Disney Company, Bob Iger, in which he also said, which I will go and read you here from my source on Deadline, as it states here, Roger Allers was a creative visionary whose many contributions to Disney will live on for generations to come. He understood the power of great storytelling, how unforgettable characters, emotions, and music can come together to create something timeless. His work helped define an era of animation that continues to inspire audiences around the world, and we are deeply grateful for everything he gave to Disney. Our hearts are with his family, friends, and collaborators. So, as Dave Bozert described, yes, the big thing that he is the most well known for is being the co-director of The Lion King alongside Rob Minkoff. But on top of that, he was also noted to be a key player during the Disney Renaissance, where he was there as Disney was having one of their biggest comeback in the studio's history, where he did work on the story on Oliver and Company, and then he worked on The Little Mermaid, and then he became the head of story in Beauty and the Beast, and was also noted to work on the story of Aladdin, down to the point where he also got a writing credit for it. But that's not the only thing that he has done. Those were not the only contributions that he has done with Disney. Because at the same time, he is also known for directing an animated short called The Little Match Girl, based on the Hans Christian Andersen tale. Now, this was originally supposed to be for a unfinished Fantasia project, or like a third Fantasia movie that ultimately got scrapped, but he was well into production on The Little Match Girl that Disney just decided, you know what, let's just go and finish that project there, and we'll release that as its own thing. And this was also noted to be very beloved by audiences. In fact, some people could even go as far and say that it was one of Disney's biggest tearjerkers. Like, if you want something to go and cry at, The Little Match Girl is indeed that thing right there. I mean, it's a great short, but it's also like one of those that just feels hard to watch, mainly because it's like you're just there at the end like, I just wanted to have a good time with a Disney cartoon. Why would you go and do this to me? But I'm just kidding. But it's still a wonderful cartoon. But also, another notable thing that he has done is that there was a project that he wanted to work, which was this Prince and the Pauper story, but the entire theme of it is that it's set in Incan times. And he was ready to go and try to adapt this. And it was even completely chronicled on a documentary called The Sweatbox. However, the production was considered to be, I wouldn't say problematic, but there were a lot of troubles that happened during that time, down to the point that the entire project, it wasn't canceled, but desperately needed a straight up reboot, that they really need to go and change up the story, change up the characters, change up the style, pretty much change up everything, which ultimately led to Roger Allers to just leave it because it was no longer his. And that's why his project, The Kingdom of the Sun, is what we know today as The Emperor's New Groove. It's a bit of a shame that his personal vision didn't come to life, but then again, it didn't go in vain. I mean, as you guys probably know, I love The Emperor's New Groove. It's one of my favorite Disney films, and I still consider it to be Disney Animation's funniest animated movie out there. So, I mean, sure, it's not Roger Allers, but I mean, it still came out great. It still came out as something that was just a lot of fun to go and watch. But then afterwards, his legacy still continued with animation, where he did do a couple more projects afterwards, or a few more projects after that, like still putting his animation touch onto other places outside of Disney. One of which being one of the first directors at Sony Pictures Animation, where he co-directed Open Season. Now, I'm personally not a fan of Open Season, but I mean, he did contribute to like actually get things started for Sony Pictures Animation to where they are today, being known as the studio that has brought us some major animated features, including the Spider-Verse films, the Mitchells vs. the Machines, Vivo, and just recently with K-pop Demon Hunters. But then there was another project that he has made, another project that he directed, and honestly, I would say is easily the most underrated thing that Roger Allers has done, and that is the 2014 movie The Prophet, based on the book by Khalil Gibran. And that animated movie, even though it's not often talked about nowadays, it is more of an anthology kind of feature where like it has its own base style, but then they would bring in a bunch of other independent animators, including Bill Plimpton, and I believe Cartoon Saloon also had a hand in working on that film. I might be wrong on that. But it's an anthology feature, and honestly, it's such a beautiful film that I highly recommend you go and watch. And also, I might have told this story before, but I remember The Prophet was actually the movie that actually saved my love for animation. Because this was actually back in 2018, and this was often considered to be one of the worst moments for the cartoon community. It was back when the whole Cal art style argument was still in full swing. I mean, nowadays we know that it is an absolute bullcrap argument, and we know that, like, even though very recently people were trying to bring back the Cal art style argument as a way to go and attack Disney and Pixar, especially with some of their later animated features, like with Elio turning red and Luca and stuff like that. But like, again, we all know that it's just absolutely bullcrapped, and like people would only bring it up just for grifting reasons. But anyways, back in 2018, like that was like during the height of the whole Cal art style argument. But then it ultimately went too far when there was this far-right troll on Twitter who actually used the Cal art style argument to go and actually do a mass shooting threat at the actual Cal Arts, at the actual California school, in which they had to have a day where they had to completely shut down the school because of that potential threat. And that was the moment where it just went way too far. And again, I myself, like, I just felt like I had enough of it. Like, it was really the moment where the fandom seriously ruined the whole, and it seriously ruined animation for me. Like, I was really that upset. It was the moment where the entire cartoon community was pretty much as bad or even straight up worse than how I was with the whole Sony animation thing. So honestly, it just left me like completely upset, completely demotivated from making more videos. It was just like, I just felt like that whole incident, like it was just a bad time all around. But then a friend of mine actually recommended me to go and watch the 2014 movie The Prophet, just to go and like remind myself of like what animation is, because they were a massive fan of it. So I figured, you know what, I'll see how it is. And that movie, I gotta say, was absolutely beautiful. It was seriously underrated. Seeing all the different variety of styles, seeing the beautiful story that it ultimately weaves into with all of that. It was a great animated film. And that, again, is what saved my love for animation. It reminded me, why is it that I love this medium? Why is it that like a big part of my life has been revolved around animation? And I would even say that I wouldn't be where I was today if I hadn't seen The Prophet. Like, I know it sounds like a major hyperbole, but The Prophet really was one of those movies that actually changed my life for the better. And to keep, to maintain that love for animation, and a great reminder of the beauty of what the medium can do in terms of storytelling and in terms of artistry. If you guys haven't seen The Prophet, I highly recommend that you would go and do so. And this is honestly why it's just all the more tragic to hear about the passing of Roger Allers. And this, again, is not even to mention about The Lion King. I mean, like, I know I would go on about like many of the legacy that he would put in with like the Disney Renaissance and like The Little Match Girl and The Prophet, but honestly, with The Lion King, of course, I gotta go and mention that. And I mean, it's one of my favorite Disney animated features. I consider it to be, of course, an absolute masterpiece and even one of the greatest animated films out there. So, of course, like, that thing was such a massive game changer. And not to mention that The Lion King was, like, according to my parents, was actually the first movie that I ever experienced in theaters in my life. So I started my cinematic journey in such a major way with The Lion King. So yeah, like that alone is such a massive deal. But then again, with The Lion King, like, what more can be said that hasn't already been said? It's such a phenomenal feature, one of the best things that Disney has created in terms of animated movies or just movies in general, still greatly influential to this day. And a big part of it is thanks to the help of Roger Allers' directing. So with all that, it makes it all the more tragic to hear him leave, to see him pass on. And keep in mind, as I am recording this, his passing is still fresh. Like, we still don't really know what is it specifically that he died from. Like, we still have no confirmation as to what may have caused it. All we know is that he is sadly gone. So that is why, honestly, as I said at the beginning, this one really stings. And this one to me really was the first death of 2026 that really does hit hard. In fact, this is the first death that really hits hard that way in a long time, because this dude really played a role in my personal love for animation. So with all that said, I think the only thing that I could say is just, Mr. Allers, even though we have never met before, I just want to say thank you for your contribution in animation. It really has changed my life, and it really has emboldened my love for animation. Like, you really are one of the most influential people in animation that honestly has really given me that passion for that medium. And it's really tragic to see you go, and may he rest in peace, and may his legacy forever live on. Like, may he forever be known as the animation legend that he deserves to be recognized as. I think I'm starting to feel like I'm about to cry here. So I think that's going to be the perfect time to go onto our next break. And when we do come back, we're going to go and really lighten up the mood. And there is a new project that is announced that if you are a fan of animation history like I am, then you better keep your eye on it, because this is actually a very important piece of it that unfortunately not many people are talking about, but honestly, they should. So we'll be right back after this. All right, welcome back. Now, when it comes to our next story, let's go and lighten up the mood, because I know that they're not fun subjects, what I talked about with the past two stories here. Like, discussing about people who have passed away, rather if they have been completely disgraced, like Scott Adams, or people who are recognized as beloved legends like Roger Allers. It's not always fun to look into that. So we're going to go and lighten up the mood, and I'll give you something to go and be excited about, to be hyped up about, especially if you're a fan of animation history. If you love to go into the past and look into some of the most influential pieces of animation, how they're made and all that kind of stuff, and looking into the prominent figures who shaped the medium to become what it is today, then let me tell you, there's going to be an upcoming documentary that really fits the bill on that. And it's honestly something that I feel like should be discussed a lot more, especially when this is often considered to be one of the most influential animation studios in history, or what I would go and call it, the most influential animation studio that nobody's really talking about. So with that said, let's go ahead and discuss about UPA. Yes, very recently, there was a special panel that was happening in California that was all dedicated to UPA, pretty much watching the cartoons, discussing about the history, and, pretty much talking about the big impact of UPA and how its legacy still stands today in the field of animation. And it had some prominent recognizable names, which includes Jerry Beck, Tom Cito, and, oh, wouldn't you know it, Jorge Gutiérrez, back in AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast on this particular episode. We were just talking about you, Jorge. No, but in all seriousness, though, during that panel, the biggest announcement that came out was that they revealed that there's going to be a new documentary that is going to be dedicated to UPA, which will be called Animation Mavericks, The Forgotten Story of UPA, which will be brought to us by Kevin Schreck. And this is a name that you might probably find to be familiar, because Kevin Schreck is actually the documentarian who brought us The Persistence of Vision, which that chronicled the history of The Thief and the Cobbler, and Richard Williams' long journey of trying to get that movie made, but unfortunately, it ultimately did not work out for him. But anyways, going back into here, yes, he's going to be back creating another documentary that specifically looks into animation history, specifically discussing about UPA. Now, to go into details, by the way, if you want to have some context about UPA itself, or what this documentary will be looking into, it states here, reading from my source on Variety, it states, Animation Mavericks covers the origins and legacy of the innovative and iconoclastic studio that produced characters including Mr. Magoo and Gerald McBoing Boing. Founded in 1941 by former Disney animators, the studio was located next to the Smokehouse restaurant in Burbank in a John Lautner design building. It introduced a minimalistic form of animation that captured the mid-century style of the era, winning 3 Oscars for short animated films out of the 15 nominations. In the 1960s, UPA produced TV staple Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, the primetime series The Famous Adventures of Mr. Magoo, and the theatrical feature film Gay Paris, written by Chuck Jones. And it's also worth noting, by the way, that with some of these features, or some of these projects, on top of winning some Oscars, with Mr. Magoo and Gerald McBoing Boing, Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, I believe it is actually stated, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but it is actually the first ever animated Christmas special that aired on television. But going back into this, there is actually a comment, or actually, allow me to go and read you a little bit more about Animation Mavericks and the people who are also involved with this on top of Kevin Schreck, in which it says here that on top of Schreck being the director and producer of the feature, he collaborated with animation director and producer Rachel Gitlevich, executive producer Tim Finn, and producer Sylvie Bossereau, the granddaughter of UPA co-founder Steve Basusto, and daughter T. Basusto. I hope I said that name right. T. Basusto began working on a UPA documentary over 20 years ago, but left it unfinished, and the documentary is produced in cooperation with the Basusto estate. Schreck even put out a comment, so I'm going to go and read you here, in which he says here, Animation Mavericks marks my return to making films about cinema history for the first time in over a decade. What brought me to this subject was that this piece of history felt both timely and timeless. Audiences will be transported to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s as studios and studio heads clash and innovate. Labor organizing, the Red Scare, and the revolutionary modernist art movement all take center stage in telling the riveting and unearthed history of UPA. Now, we don't necessarily have a confirmation as to who else is involved, who else got interviewed on this, or really how deep are they going to go into the history of UPA. But they did state that this documentary is actually going to be coming out kinda soon. I say kinda because they said that the release date is going to be later this year. Now, I don't know if this means that it's going to be coming out in a few months, or maybe this is going to be coming out in the summer, or maybe this is only going to be coming out at the end of the year, but somewhere in 2026, it is going to be coming out. However, they did confirm that if you want to go and follow for more updates on Animation Mavericks, you can go and follow them on Instagram on the Animation Mavericks account. And also, they did release a poster of the feature. Now, that's pretty much all that we do know about this. But yeah, apparently we are going to be getting a UPA documentary. And in my opinion, honestly, this is absolutely well needed. This is something that we kind of deserve to have a while ago, actually. T actually got the idea 20 years ago to make a documentary to go and look into UPA, but unfortunately that never really went anywhere. But honestly, for me as an animation fan, I feel like this is absolutely necessary to have. Because the thing is with UPA, despite its impact in the animation industry, as I said before, nobody's really talking about it, and very few people seem to really care about talking about UPA. Because I can guarantee you about 99% of the time when people would actually go and talk about UPA, it's only in universities and colleges when people are studying cinema history, or more specifically, studying animation history. And that's pretty much it. Other than that, though, it is extremely rare if you see people go and actually talk about animation history on social media or on blogs or anywhere outside of academics. Like, it's only there, and that's pretty much it. And the thing is that with UPA, you know, when it comes to UPA, the sad thing is that its relevancy is unfortunately long gone. And I mean, I'm not saying that as a slam on the studio itself or a slam on its cartoons and stuff like that. But the thing is that the relevancy of UPA and its characters, people don't really talk about them anymore. Like, the thing is that you would be lucky if your parents would even have any kind of nostalgic memories of a UPA cartoon, or even with some of the more famous characters like Gerald McBoing Boing or Mr. Magoo. Maybe your grandparents might have some, but nowadays, it just feels like the relevancy of UPA is like way too distant from nowadays. I mean, the impact is still there, and I mean, there are a lot of like major animation fans and people working in the industry who do understand about the impact and the cultural relevance of UPA, but nowadays it's unfortunately considered to be a deep cut in animation history. Like, you know, you're a true animation nerd if you actually are aware of what UPA is, or have even went out of your way to go and check out some UPA cartoons beyond the ones from Mr. Magoo. And the sad thing is that even if we would go and try to express interest about UPA, if we would try to go and have a discussion about it, very few people would even understand what we're talking about or even care. And I think that's kind of the real tragedy about all this, is the fact that even if there was an attempt to go and talk about UPA, good luck trying to find someone who would actually care about it. Even if someone like me or any other cartoon YouTuber out there, like either like if someone like me, Mr. Enter, Pan Pizza, Toonrific Tariq, Cartoonshi, or even amongst the bigger ones like with Saberspark or Shafrillas, if we would go and try to make a video about the history of UPA or the impact of UPA, very few people would even care to go and watch it unless we would go and desperately make it as clickbaity as possible. Like, try to do everything we can in order to really lure audiences in, like really going again in that desperate route. Like, even if we would have to go and put in like sexy women onto the thumbnail, or if we would emphasize like those clickbaity grifting tactics, like emphasizing the Disney hate of it, like saying like, this studio was Disney's biggest rival in the 40s and 50s. This studio made better cartoons than Disney in the 1950s. Like, you know, even like you would have to really go into that route if you even want to get the attention of audiences, even amongst people in the cartoon community, if you want them to get interested to learn about UPA. And this even applies, like, not just with people like me, but even if you get someone like Kevin Perjurer or Lindsay Ellis, and you have them make this very well-crafted documentary that lasts for like hours on end, and people would call it like the video essay of the year, again, it wouldn't be the most successful thing that they would create because there's not that much interest in UPA there. And again, this is not a slam on UPA. It's just the unfortunate reality of the relevance of UPA where it is right now, and that not many people are talking about it as much, especially when it comes to the influence that they have made. Now, I do understand the argument that technically it's not really, like there might be some elements in it that might not be considered to be aged well, I guess you could say, considering that there are some things like when you look at Mr. Magoo, maybe it could be a case of Speedy Gonzales where you're looking a little too deeply into the way that it might be offensive. But I could understand if some people might look into like the Mr. Magoo cartoons and they would be considered to be ageist and ableist, considering that the grand majority of the jokes in those cartoons is just the fact that Mr. Magoo is a blind old man. And maybe that might not necessarily fly with some people. And, but with that, again, I might be wrong on that. Maybe, like, again, it's another case of like Speedy Gonzales where people are getting offended over cartoons over like nothing. But still, though, again, this is just to go and emphasize that, you know, we don't often talk about UPA, and people don't seem to care that much about UPA. And even I'll admit that, like, this is something that even I'm guilty of, where, like, even though, like, I'm well into animation history, I love looking into animation history, my knowledge on UPA is unfortunately limited. The most that I've done with UPA is that I did discuss about a Gay Paris. Like, many years ago, I did do a review on that movie, but I will admit that it's one of those that did not age well because I didn't have a full understanding about the impact of UPA. It's one of those, honestly, I would actually categorize Gay Paris as a movie that I'm willing to give a second chance, and I would be down to go and make another review of Gay Paris, but with better knowledge about the studio and with more respect for the studio as well. So that's just something I wanted to go and add onto that. So yeah, even I will admit, I need to learn more about UPA, which is why I'm personally excited to hear that this is actually happening, that now we are going to have a documentary that will go into the history of UPA and explain to us its history, how it got created, and the the impact that we are seeing today with the feature. And honestly, this is another one that I will say I at the very least am optimistically curious about. I actually very much enjoyed the Persistence of Vision. I think Kevin Schreck actually did a very good job with that documentary. Although I don't find it to be like the best documentary out there. I do find that there might be a few pieces that might feel unfinished or that they didn't fully get into. But still, though, Persistence of Vision is still a great documentary. It definitely is worth checking out. And I definitely do trust him with making something with Animation Mavericks and with UPA, especially that he does have that direct connection with the Basusto family and actually looking into the creation of UPA along with the famous cartoons. So that's why, honestly, I just want to go and help out to go and spread the word about Animation Mavericks. And if you're like me and you love animation history, you love to learn more about, these old studios and the impact that they have left to this day, honestly, I highly recommend you go and keep an eye out for Animation Mavericks. Again, if you have an Instagram account, you can also go and follow them on there so that you could stay up to date to know when Animation Mavericks is going to be coming out. All right, so with that said, we're going to go on to one more break. And when we come back, I got one more story to go and cover. And this is one that many people have asked me about my thoughts about. And unlike the Speedy Gonzales movie or Animation Mavericks, oh boy, am I not excited to see what may come with this. So stay tuned for that. And now, everyone, it is now time that we shall go and conclude this episode off with the grand finale. And for this grand finale, I will go and discuss about a project that I've had people messaging me about what's gonna be going on with this. That apparently this is actually going to be a thing. And funny enough, this isn't necessarily new that has been revealed, because this actually happened a while back. Specifically, this occurred during the Golden Globe Awards. And I guess it was only until recently when people look back into what was reported and, you know, like all the glitz and glamour that's been going on. But then upon revisiting that, they noticed that this was said and that maybe we should be reporting this. We should let people know that apparently this is going on, because it sounds like some pretty significant news, especially when this franchise might be actually making a big comeback. And case in point, instead of me telling you directly what it is, I'm actually going to go and let Keegan-Michael Key explain what this is about.
Your latest animated.
My latest one is I'm about to start work on Hotel Transylvania 5.
I remember the first one when the first one came out.
And
yes.
I play Marie the Mummy. That's a mouthful. You think? Yeah, I think I'd be able to say that, right?
How do you find your voice for each character? Is it just your voice and a little twist, or are?
All right, so that was pretty much all that they have mentioned. Keegan-Michael Key would then go and discuss about his process of doing voices, you know, doing characters, whether it be like with Toad in the Super Mario movie or Murray in the Hotel Transylvania films. And that was the big thing that he actually revealed, that Sony Pictures Animation is indeed in production to make a Hotel Transylvania 5. Now, keep in mind that as I am recording this, there is no official announcement coming from Sony Pictures Animation directly. They didn't officially say anything about it as of yet. For now, the only thing that we actually do know about it is literally just the fact that Keegan-Michael Key will be coming back voicing Murray. Now, it is worth mentioning, however, that we did get a little bit of a clue before of the potential return of Hotel Transylvania 5. And it's not necessarily the fact that we are also going to be getting a Netflix series called Motel Transylvania, but it was actually because of Genndy Tartakovsky, in which he mentioned that Sony was interested in actually revisiting the franchise. In fact, let me just go into my source here on Screen Rant, in which he actually says right over here, even, hold on a sec, let me just go and properly highlight this. Even though Transformania was meant to be the final film in the franchise, and Sony promoted it as such, Genndy Tartakovsky, who directed the first 3 movies and co-wrote the 4th, predicted over a year ago that another sequel would be greenlit and suggested that Sony was eager to revisit the series. So that's pretty much the thing. So far, this is our one confirmation that there is indeed going to be a Hotel Transylvania 5. Tabarnak, where do I begin? So, let me just go and say that, as you guys probably know, I am not a fan of the Hotel Transylvania films. I'm not even a fan of the first movie. I mean, I'll give it. It's not the worst thing that I've seen. It's not like the worst film from Sony Pictures Animation. Far from it, in fact. And it's far from being Adam Sandler's worst movie that he has made. And I mean, I will give it that there are a few good things that I can mention about it. There are some jokes that even I'll admit that are actually funny. And also, I do understand the concept they were going with. I get it. Make a hotel for all different kinds of Halloween type monsters. Like there was definitely some great potential with that concept. But still, though, even with a great concept and even with some funny jokes, they were not enough for me to enjoy it. I just find that these films are just awful kids movies. They just feel like mechanically made kids features that honestly, it's just slapped all together just to make some kind of Halloween themed movie. I was just not really on board with it. I mean, sure, it's not my personal cup of tea, but I just didn't have a good time. I just find the story to be bland. The animation Like, I get the direction it wants to go, being more stylistic and be more reminiscent of Saturday morning cartoons, but I feel like it might have gone a little bit too far with it, and the way that they interpret that with computer animation is definitely not the best. I could think of many other features that kind of pull that style off better. I mean, at best, it's not my cup of tea. At worst, I just find that movie to just be bad. Not horrible, not terrible, but just bad. And then it just got worse and worse and worse, where with every movie they would go and produce, they became less funny, they became less enjoyable, and the quality just sinks lower and lower to the point that Transformania is so far standing as a strong contender as one of the worst animated movies of this decade so far. That one was just absolutely awful, and it really stood as something in which Sony just ran out of ideas with. Like, not only was it terrible, it was just so unnecessary. It really ended that franchise off with a massive thud. Like, the best that I could say is that maybe it's not as terrible as Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2 or the Emoji Movie, but oh boy, it was close. It was very close to being that level of absolute terribleness. It really ended the franchise off on a massive thud, and it really showed that Sony really milked that franchise off dry to the bone. And even though it would be one thing that, okay, you want to continue the franchise off with a series. All right, fine. You can do that thing on the side. Maybe you have a few other ideas that you want to do that goes beyond the typical formula that you would go and repeatedly do in the movies. And I can imagine that the formula of Hotel Transylvania could probably work off a bit better than it could work off better as a series than it would in a movie. But now that you're making a fifth film, oh boy, really? After Transformania, you want to go and make another? Okay, let me just go and say, I think it is safe to say that I think that this is one of the worst ideas that Sony Pictures Animation has in a while, or at least in recent years. This is the worst idea that they got out there. And not to mention that this just sounds absolutely unnecessary. We don't need a fifth movie. We don't need the franchise to go and continue that way. And so much so, I just want to go and just say that I cannot be the only one who thinks that. Come on. Like, even amongst fans, I know we don't see eye to eye, but could you at least give it to me that we are on the same page, that making a fifth movie is probably not a good idea, that it could only lead to a freaking disaster? Like, seriously, I could think of 3 significant reasons why a fifth movie is just a bad idea. Like, number 1, it is obviously clear that Sony is only doing this for cash-grabbing reasons. Like, they're only doing this because now it's becoming trendy and popular for popular animated movie franchises to go and just keep on going, to go beyond just doing a trilogy. Like, even if a 4th movie would be considered stretching it a bit, now it's perfectly fine for them to go and continue. Even if they have established that the franchise was over, they might as well go and bring it back. We're seeing this with Toy Story 5, we're seeing this with Despicable Me 5, and we're even seeing this with Shrek 5 and even an Ice Age 6. Now, I know some people might argue that when it comes to Ice Age specifically, that technically they're kind of doing the same thing with what Hotel Transylvania is doing right now, considering that technically the last movie that they have made was the Disney Plus film, The Adventures of Buck Wild. And yes, I hate that movie as well. I think it is absolutely terrible. And I remember even back when I did the I think it was the top 5 worst animated films of 2022, I considered Buck Wild and Transformania to be on par as the worst animated features of their respective year. But the thing is, at the very least, with Buck Wild, that thing was already established to be just a Disney Plus exclusive. Like, Disney didn't necessarily have any major plans to make this like a main thing for the Ice Age franchise. They always planned this to be like a little side project that's just going to be on Disney Plus and nothing else. Whereas Transformania, on the other hand, even though that premiered on Amazon Prime, they originally intended it to have that be released on the big screen. They wanted that to actually be a main Hotel Transylvania movie, and for that to actually be the real 4th Hotel Transylvania film. Like with Ice Age, Boiling Point is the official 6th movie, not Buck Wild. But with Hotel Transylvania, however, they established that as the 4th movie. So it was only very recently that Sony considered that to be the end of the Hotel Transylvania franchise, or at least the end of the Hotel Transylvania movies. So now making a 5th feature, it just feels like now Sony just wants to hop onto the trend where they also want to have their 5th movie as well, which honestly feels ridiculous because it still feels fresh. It still feels recent that it was declared to be gone. Because, like, at least with, like, Shrek and even Ice Age, they took some time before they would go and return. Because both of those films are coming out in, like, 2027. So it would be over a decade that the last time that we've had a true feature from them. Even with Shrek, it was like, it's going to be like 17 or 16 years, or 17 years after the last one with Shrek Forever After. And even though, like, yes, that one also had, like, some technical spin-off features, like with Puss in Boots, but Puss in Boots already established that to be its own thing, especially with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. So in that regards, I just feel like Sony is just doing this not because they have a great idea of what they want to do to return. It's just because they want to follow the trend that all the others, like what Disney and Universal is doing with their respective franchises. Like, yeah, we can have a 5th movie too. But then there is the second reason why I feel like this is just a disaster and that there's just no point for it, is because in canon, in the actual movie, or in the movies, they've established that it is done. We don't need any more Hotel Transylvania films because the legacy of the Hotel Transylvania itself is already finished. Because in the end of Transformania, they've established all that this, the whole legacy of Hotel Transylvania, it's done. It's finished. Dracula is officially retired. The entire Hotel Transylvania itself is burned down to the ground. And now Mavis and Johnny have the keys to this new Hotel Transylvania. And that's pretty much it. And maybe I'm wrong on the details, but they've also established that this new hotel can be a place where both humans and monsters can live together in harmony on this hotel, and that's it. So pretty much they have established that it is done. It is over. How the fridge can you continue from there? And this is not even to mention how there is just a stupid amount of characters that they would go and like include onto the picture that now it feels like it's way too much. They keep adding in all these different characters from not just the original, but also from the sequels, like with the second film and with the third movie as well. Like now it just feels like the cast is just way too cluttered. Like the characters really are just quantity over quality, to the point that like it just makes the fourth movie just so exhausting and really stretching out these personalities way too thin. Not to mention that the ideas that they would have with them are just like total flops. Like, they didn't even go well with the fans. Case in point, look at the reactions to I forgot his name, but the David Spade Invisible Man, that they thought like, oh, he's a hunk when you actually do see him. No, it turns out that he looks more like a Jewish stereotype. But yeah, honestly, like, in canon, how the fridge can you even continue on after the events of Transformania? Now, granted, the most that I could say that could end up actually helping Hotel Transylvania is that instead of looking forward, the best that they can do is go back. If they would go and do a prequel to Hotel Transylvania, like, you know, talk about like the making of the hotel itself, like how Dracula would go and create, maybe you could actually have some potential, especially if you could cut out a lot of the characters from the sequel and actually make a Hotel Transylvania movie that doesn't involve Johnny whatsoever. Maybe at that point you could probably have potential to the point that maybe I could be on board with it. In fact, like, the more I think about it, the more that even I'm thinking, okay, I could see where they could go in that direction, that maybe it could actually work out and even have me interested. But that's at best. But if they're going to go and continue with a sequel, that just spells doom altogether, because they've already established in the movie that Hotel Transylvania, and I mean specifically the hotel itself, is just straight up done. Even Dracula's job in the hotel is straight up done as well. But then you have the third reason. And this is the one that I'll give it to Sony, that maybe they could go and turn things around and they could go and actually fix up. But based on what we have seen in the fourth movie, this is the third biggest problem. And this is why a fifth movie just sounds like an absolute desperate cash grab. And that is the fact that they don't have their main actor. Are they going to go and make a Hotel Transylvania 5 without Adam Sandler? Now, granted, I will go and give Transformania this. Probably the best thing about that movie is that it does give Brian Hall that dream of actually voicing a main character in a big name animated feature. Like that, honestly, I have nothing but great things to say, especially to the guy. I want to give I want to give out a big congratulations to him for achieving that major goal that many actors dream of wanting to go and achieve. Like, that's great for him, but that is still considered a problematic factor for the franchise itself. Because say what you will about all these other franchises that are getting their big fifth movie out, or their big sixth movie or whatever, with those movies, at the very least, they still have their main actors on board to play their respective characters. Toy Story still has Tom Hanks and Tim Allen play as Woody and Buzz for Toy Story 5. Despicable Me still has Steve Carell playing as Gru in the Despicable Me films, and even in the Minions movies as well. And then you also got like Shrek 5, in which they announced that Mike Myers, Cameron Diaz, and Eddie Murphy are going to be coming back as Shrek, Fiona, and Donkey respectively. And even Ice Age, sure, only Simon Pegg returned for that Buck Wild movie, but in Boiling Point, most of those people are going to be coming back. They actually got back Ray Romano, Dennis Leary, John Leguizamo, Queen Latifah, and Simon Pegg to return for their voices onto that. Are they real? But when it comes to Hotel Transylvania, however, are they still going to go and continue Hotel Transylvania without Adam Sandler? Or not just that, but Adam Sandler and Kevin James, considering that they both bailed out on the fourth movie? I heard it was scheduling conflicts, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's because Adam Sandler was just fed up with the franchise and just doesn't want to be involved with it anymore. But still, though, when it comes to that, would Sony be able to convince them to actually come back to the franchise? Or are they still going to be having replacement actors whatsoever? And consider, and I just bring that up mainly because of the fact that when it comes to Hotel Transylvania, you look, the thing is with Adam Sandler is that he is literally the face of Hotel Transylvania. Dracula is basically a cartoony Adam Sandler, and he was designed as a cartoony Adam Sandler. So it's kind of weird when you don't have Adam Sandler come back to play as an Adam Sandler voice, which is often, and like, again, I love that Brian Hall got that great opportunity, but it's a problematic factor with Transformania that got a lot of people questioning, why didn't they get Adam Sandler come back to voice the character that looks like Adam Sandler? There's just something very backwards about it. And honestly, if Sony is going to be moving forward with this and not bring back those actors like Kevin James and Adam Sandler, then that is a clear sign that it is nothing more but a desperate cash grab on their part. Maybe this is the one that I will give it to them, that I could be proven wrong, and maybe Adam Sandler will be coming back, that Sony will be giving them a massive paycheck for. But I don't know. After the fourth movie, I just have my doubts. But overall, when it comes to this announcement of Hotel Transylvania 5, I feel that this is honestly peak unnecessary. If people are going to go out of their way and make their rants about movies like Toy Story 5 or Ice Age 6 or Shrek 5 or whatever, if they call those unnecessary and shaming the studios for creating those movies, then honestly, Sony deserves a piece of that hate as well. Because this is so uncalled for that we need another Hotel Transylvania, considering that it's only been a few years that they declared that the movies were over. I can give it to them that they can go and keep on going with that Netflix series, but making a fifth feature altogether, I don't care if it would be released in theaters or even if it's just on streaming, like put it out on Amazon or Netflix or whatever. This is just unnecessary. I just feel like, honestly, watching Sony go back to making a Hotel Transylvania 5, it's like watching a friend texting their ex, hoping that they could get back to them. You know, I'm just there like, what the fridge are you doing, dude? Like, you don't want to go back with them. Like, you do remember how toxic they've been to you. Your life is just so much better without them. Why the hell would you want to go and come back? And all I can imagine is just Sony trying to respond back going, but, you know, they're just responding going like, I know, like, we've been through hard times. I know that, you know, she's been very bad to me, but I mean, I still have feelings for her, man. I still love Mavis. And I mean, dad ass though, I cannot deny dad ass. I miss her and I miss dad ass. And I know I'm making a stupid joke here, but I mean, I actually do know some guys who are actually like that, where they, you know, that little element of lust can actually bring them back into some kind of toxic relationship. That is a thing. Keep that in mind. And that's honestly how I feel with the way that Sony is going back to freaking Hotel Transylvania. They want to go back to their freaking toxic ex. So yeah, but with all that said, I just want to go and say I cannot be the only one who feels that way. I can't be the only one who feels like, no, this is unnecessary. This is not a thing this is not a thing that people can just go and pass off by saying, oh, that Animat, we know him and his wacky ways with how he feels about Hotel Transylvania. Of course he would do this wacky little rant about Hotel Transylvania 5. No. This cannot be passed off as a fun little meme. This cannot be passed off as a fun little joke here. Come on, man. You gotta give it to me that freaking Hotel Transylvania 5 is at the very least an unnecessary cash grab of an idea. All right? I'm just saying. I'm begging you, please, at least give me this one thing that we don't need a fifth movie. I know I'm just goofing around on this, but yeah, I think it is safe to say that with all this, I'm not looking forward to a fifth Hotel Transylvania film. It just sounds like a freaking cash grab, and I know that there could be that very tiny little chance that maybe it could work out. Maybe it could actually turn out to be good. Maybe it could turn out to be the best Hotel Transylvania movie. But those chances are like lottery numbers small. So I am not looking forward to this thing whatsoever. But with that said, though, that should now go and conclude this episode off of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. Again, I do apologize that this was not live streamed, but I do promise that on the next episode, I will be back on Twitch where I will go and discuss the crazy animation news that has come out in the past few days. And especially, I know this is going to be a hyped one that will be coming out on the next one, considering that there is going to be the Oscar nominations that shall be revealed, so stay tuned for that. But with all that said, I also want to go and say that if you want to go and follow for more stories of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, if you want to go and follow for more episodes, then you can go and subscribe to me on the AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast YouTube channel, as well as the Animat Live Twitch channel. Ooh, sudden cough attack right there. But at the same time, though, if you would also want to go and follow me on whatever podcast service you're listening to, whether it be on Spotify, Google, Apple, and several others, then don't forget to go and follow me on that as well. And with all that said, I would like to say thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, see you later, dudes.